All right, guys, welcome to Flav Oriana's MMA show. I'm your host, Flav Oriana, brought to you by Four Corner Sports. UFC Vegas 85 is officially in the books. It was headlined by Nasruddin Imavov versus Roman Dolidze. Two middleweights inside the top 15, getting a crack at it at the world's most famous Apex. And then the co-main event was, the ones that people were more interested about. It was Renato Moicano versus Drew Dober. We haven't seen Moicano fight all of 2023. Dober, we've seen him fight, knocking out Bobby Green. What's it called? He's fought your Islam Mahashevs of the world and stuff like that when he was coming up. Good test, for both fighters. It's not like both fighters are going to be fighting for a world title, but it was a good slot to have as the co-main event for a UFC Apex. Natalia Silva, somebody that I've been very high on, as well as many others who talk about MMA. Natalia Silva was on the card. She ended up fighting Viviana Araújo. And then I will talk about a couple of fights. One of my favorite fights on the prelims was Charles Johnson versus Maxim. I can't remember his first name, but it was a really good fight. I believe that one fight of the night. And then the whole Landon Quinones Marquel fight. I'll give you my thoughts on that if we have enough time. But let's start it off with the main event. Roman Dolidze versus Nasruddin Imavov. Guys, it was a fight. I'll be honest, I picked Roman Dolidze to win. Nasruddin Imavov in round one ended up really giving Dolidze the business, and Dolidze ended up resorting to trying to find a way to get the submission, and that wasn't going to be the case whatsoever. The fight went all 5 rounds. First round, I gave it to Nasruddin. I gave him a 10-8 round because he really gave a good ass whooping to Roman Dolidze. And Dolidze, anytime he got in trouble, he would go into the clinch, and then he would try to go for a leg lock or a leg crank or something on that nature. He was just trying to see if he could catch Nasruddin slipping, right? And that wasn't going to be the case whatsoever because Nasruddin was, focused. He knew that what he needed to do. Although I will say is that with Nasruddin Imavov, he did hurt him at one point. He hurt him with an elbow shot. I believe, when they were inside the clinch. And I don't know if it was fatigueness or tiredness, but I firmly did feel that, that Imavov, if he had the right mental whereabouts, right? I don't know if it was a cardio issue or he just didn't have the IQ to understand that he really hurt, Dolidze. I personally have felt that Imavov could have ended the fight a lot sooner. I think that was in the 4th round. Overall, good win by Nasruddin Imavov. Dolidze ended up losing. There was a controversial point deduction because Dolidze, where he was getting his ass kicked for the majority of the fight, Imavov had him in a similar, situation where Aljo and Petr Yan, but not to that extreme extent, right? Where, Petr Yan ends up losing the title. Dolidze ends up kicking, Imavov ends up kicking Dolidze right in the face, and he was a grounded fighter. Now, he wasn't grounded in the aspect of he had a knee down. He had his hand down as kind of like, as a safety protection. And he knew that if he has his hand down, then he's considered a grounded fighter. And Dolidze ends up kicking him right in the face. I looked like a toe ends into the eye or something like that, right? And it resulted into, Dolidze being, out of it and stuff like that. And at one point I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, all right, this might end in the disqualification. Me personally, I was thinking, like, if it ends in disqualification, then, I end up winning, and even though Dolidze was getting his ass kicked, right? While in that process, you had Chris Curtis, a former opponent of Nasruddin Imavov, who's actually in the corner of Roman Dolidze, was just, exchanging words with Imavov, and Imavov looked like he was trying to, climb over the cage and try to fight Chris Curtis, and Herb Dean was like holding him back. from even attempting to try to climb the cage and threatening, saying that, hey, if you continue this, I will disqualify you. I will disqualify you. Overall, nothing really came about that whatsoever. What did ended up transpiring is just that naturally Imavov was able to take care of business and then move on. What's next for both fighters? I mean, it was a fight that I'm personally not gonna rewatch. So that could kind of tell you that, it was a little bit of a stinker, if not too much of a stinker. What did I put down for? If Imavov, with Imavov winning, right? I want to see if what's gonna happen with Marvin Vettori, because if Marvin Vettori loses to Brandon Allen, right? Because Brandon Allen is fighting Marvin Vettori, I think, in April. If he loses, then book Vettori versus Imavov, because Vettori is a very durable fighter. The man has fought for a title before. The man has gone 8 rounds in the octagon with Israel Adesanya. The man is very good at fighting, but he's also very good at just of taking a beating in order to give a beating. So I would love to see how that matchup transpires, right? As for Roman Dolidze, I feel like, he got his ass kicked. Well, he should have won against Vettori, right? Controversial decision. Got his ass kicked by Imavov, right? And it's starting to see that, all right, maybe Roman Dolidze might need to take a step back. I was thinking, if Roman Kopylov ends up defeating Anthony Hernandez, then you could put Roman Dolidze versus Roman Kopylov. It was Roman versus Roman, right? To see who is the better Roman. And we can go from there. If not, then I would like to see Dolidze fight, somebody of a submission artist just like himself, right? Somebody of Kyle Baraglio. I know Kyle Baraglio has a bout scheduled. I think he is fighting Paul Craig. So I would love to see, that matchup, happen, because I feel like that would be a fun scrap to have. Put that on the Apex or whatever. It doesn't matter where you could put it. You could put it on the early prelims of a pay-per-view card. Who cares? Just make that fight happen. Co-main event, Renato Moicano versus Drew Dober. Look, Drew Dober can crack, man. Drew Dober can crack. But I will say this, is that Renato Moicano is a very durable fighter. I mean, he's got, his ass kicked, plenty of times in the past. And mainly, most of that has transpired at 145 pounds. But I will say is that Renato Moicano is a dog. Drew Dober, I don't know what you were doing in round 3, because you had the fight won, but the fact that you ended up allowing Moicano to jump full mount on you, that was it. It was over. I was like, Moicano has got this, signed, delivered, signed, sealed, and delivered, right? He signed the contract, he sealed, Dober's fate, and he delivered with the performance, and he delivered on the mic. I can't say everything that he ended up saying, but overall, one of the funniest things that Renato Moicano ended up putting out there was that his dad, who is 62 years old, just recently had a baby, and he wanted to fly. Moicano wanted to go home, see his wife, get her pregnant, just to remind his dad that he too can have a baby as well. That was one of the funniest things. Love the post-fight speech. Moicano's becoming a fan favorite, in my opinion, and when Moicano, excelling, right? He's not gonna be fighting for no titles. I can't see him fighting for a title. But what I will see is that I can see Moicano fighting somebody of a Dan Hooker, and I would love to see that happen. Dan Hooker versus Renato Moicano. Dan Hooker is just an ass kicker. On the stand-up game, but on the floor, Moicano is a magician, and I would love to see that happen. It is the city kickboxer, right, versus the Brazilian jiu-jitsu artist. Love to see that happen. Will we get that? There's a strong possibility. I do not want to see him Moicano fight Paddy Pimblett. It doesn't really do much, in my opinion. I know people are going to say that, it could be a hype fight and stuff like that. No. Let's not do that. Moicano versus Dan Hooker. Make that fight happen. Because who's Dan gonna fight next? He's not gonna fight Bobby Green, alright, because that fight is scrapped ever since that injury. And then we already saw what Bobby Green's fate was when he ended up fighting Jalen Turner. So Dan Hooker versus Naoto Moicano, make that fight happen. As for Drew Dober, you could put this guy with anybody. This guy is good there with fun fights. I mean, I recommended that he wasn't, for him to fight Jared Gordon. It's actually a fight that I thought he would have had on his resume by now, but I don't even think these guys were scheduled at any point, let alone fought. So, Dober versus, who up on? Yeah, Dober versus Gordon. Dober versus Gordon. And then Natty Ice, great win over Viviana Araujo. Viviana, I felt like she, was going to give Natty Ice, some type of, good litmus test and stuff like that. But Natty Ice, her footwork, in my opinion, guys, her footwork is second to none in that women's flyweight division, right? She moves around super quick, right? Her feints are pinpoint sharp. She knows exactly how she wants to throw everything. Nothing is exert, just to throw something. I love the way that she fights, right? And I feel like she has a high ceiling. The problem is that I also feel like she's very small for the division, right? And I felt like, when she came into the UFC, she should have been a 115er. She should have never been a 125er. And I feel like now she's going to end up climbing that echelon. And we will see, if she's not too small for the women's flyweight division. Because I look at girls like Macy Barber. I look at girls like Alexa Grasso, Valentina Shevchenko, right? Manny Fiorot, right? I look at girls like that, I tell myself this. I'm like, I don't see Natty Ice, having like great physical advantages over these women. She is small, but she's also very fast, and I feel like that correlates into, a good winning formula for her. She made sure that Viviana had to chase her, even though Natalia Silva was on the back foot and she was going side to side, throwing fakes. Catching Araujo in uncomfortable, positionings where she was going to catch her in fantastic angles. So I felt that Araujo was a great test. I know Lauren Murphy would be a better test too, but I also feel like that's too much of a size discrepancy, because to me, Lauren Murphy should be a 135er. All right, same thing with Macy Barber, but they want to cut down to 125, because they feel like they'll be at a more competitive state. Natalia Silva, to me, is the real deal. I feel like she has so much potential in this women's flyweight division. The only problem is that the belt movement is very, very slow. Who knows what's going to happen with women's flyweight as for like the champion, right? Are we going to go see a trilogy, or are we going to see somebody else? I think Natalia Silva has the ability to hold a UFC women's title, and I feel like within a year or so, she should be in contention to challenging for a belt. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about what's it called? Actually, no, two more fights. I wanted to talk about Gilbert Urbina versus Chuck Buffalo, Charles Radke. Now, Charles Radke trains with Bilal Muhammad. Gilbert Urbina, we've seen him in The Ultimate Fighter. I think his two previous brothers trying out for the show, and they ended up losing within the first fight. Gilbert Urbina has the most success out of the three brothers when it comes to, from a professional career. But let's get down to the business. Charles Radke was just a better fighter. I mean, he was just throwing that jab. It wasn't like he was throwing it with so much force. It was just, he was just popping a jab, and he was cocking Urbina's head to keep on snapping back. And to the point where Urbina got dropped not only once, but he got dropped twice. And the second time he got dropped, he got drilled, and the ref had to stop the fight. Overall, Gilbert Urbina, I feel like he is a little bit above than what is a Ultimate Fighter prospect, but he is not good enough to fight, those who are, legitimate, good UFC prospects. And I would say Chuck Buffalo is a good UFC prospect. I feel like his ceiling is way more higher going into the fight than a Gilbert Urbina, who looked like he was just trying to, get himself onto the UFC just because his two previous brothers have not been able to be successful. But Charles Barkley got the knockout victory. I think it was one of the rare knockouts that we ended up having on that card. And what's next for him? I mean, man, I just hope that this guy doesn't say anything reckless that's gonna hurt him later on while he has the mic. I know he says some crazy stuff, and I just feel like I hope nothing that he says isn't end up biting him in the ass. And then lastly, Charles Johnson versus Maxim. Maxim came into the fight 17-0. Charles Johnson, it was on a 4-fight losing streak. If Charles Johnson would have lost, I felt like we really would have been able to see Charles Johnson no longer in the UFC. But that wasn't the case because Maxim had a good round one, but I feel like there's levels to this. You having a 17-0 record, it looks nice, but it also looked like you were stat padding when I looked at your Tapology page, because I don't recognize any of those fighters whatsoever. They look like very low level prospects, but you're facing somebody of the high caliber of Charles Johnson, who was a former LFA champions, right? Who has great success and has been there and done that against high level mixed martial artists. And what we ended up seeing is that Charles Johnson ended up, after that round one, hiccup that he had where he ended up getting hurt against Maxim, Charles Johnson came in round 2 and 3 and just gave him the work, and then made sure and reminded Maxim why there are levels to this. And you know what? Charles Johnson is a G. Although I will say this, he is the biggest enemy of flyweight unders, right? Because there's a thing where flyweights usually finish fights, and Charles Johnson, win or lose, bet that man on decision, because he's always in to go to decision. But overall, UFC Vegas 85, it was a card. It wasn't a bad card, but it was a card. And I just wish that we can eventually move away from the Apex little by little. Just because the Apex already has served its purposes, during the pandemic, and I feel like the UFC needs to get back out there, on a weekly basis, out on the road and traveling. But until then, guys, I am Flav Oriana, and thank you for tuning in to Flav Oriana's MMA show. UFC Vegas 85 is officially in the books, and I will see you guys next time. Peace, guys. Have a good one. See ya.